Hey everyone, I'm your host Shraddha, and in this video we are going to learn about the uses of React hooks, useCallback and useMemo. Along the way, we'll also understand the uses of React higher order component, that is React Memo. So let's dive into it. We'll begin with understanding the UI. It's a very basic UI where we render a select anime's image and a couple of info that includes the title, which is the name of the anime, and a quote from it. Followed by, we have three actions button. Each of them allows us to perform certain actions on this rendered items. If you click on change image render style, it will change how this image fit inside this container. If you're aware of the object fit property, it is just changing that property. Let me tap on it. Alright. And if I click on change code, it will change this code which is being rendered here. So just randomly pick one code from that anime. Finally, clicking on change anime will change this image as well as the title and the code. Okay, let me tap on it. Alright, it's simple enough. Now let's have a look at the code. Head to the VS Code editor. Okay, it's React with TypeScript. Here we have one parent component which is called as the anime. This parent component contains all the state information, which is the selected anime, what code to render, the title, the image URL, everything lies inside the parent component. And it has two child components, image and text. Let me scroll down to it. Here we have the image component and the text component. The image component accepts a prop call as info of type object. Okay, here it is. It has two properties, URL and fit. The URL says the selected anime is image URL and the fit is how the image should fit inside the container. When you click on change image render style, it goes and changes this fit property. Okay, here is the method that is invoked and it just goes and change the object fit property. Next we have the text component. The text component accepts two string props, title and quote. Right? When you click on change quote, it calls this method toggle quote. Like go above here, it just goes and randomly picks a quote for that selected anime. Okay, and finally, when you click on change anime, it will go and change the URL of the image as well as the title and quote. So this is the method that is invoked, toggle anime. When you click on change anime, this method is invoked. It will change the selected anime as well as the code for it. So I'm not going into the details of this, like how this information has been collected or how exactly this action button work, because these are less relevant to the learnings that we are going to do about use callback or use memo. Okay, now to each of these component, this pan component we have added a console log statement, right? Here to image as well, we have added console log statement saying that image component was re-rendered, as well as to the text component which says the text component was re-rendered. Now we'll click on each of these action button and see which of all these console log statement gets rendered in the console log. Let me head back to the browser. Alright, let me clear this filter and I'll do a refresh of this window. Okay, let's enlarge it. Just extend a bit. Okay. Here you can see the first log statement is from the parent component, which is anime, followed by the log statement from the child component, image and text, right? Now let's try clicking on change image render style. So what does this action button does is it just changes this fit property, right? And who's actually using this fit property? It's just the image component and not the text component. So ideally, right, when we click on this action button, we would want the parent component to render, which is very obvious because it has that state information, followed by the image component because it's the only component that requires it, right? So let me clear this console and I'll click on this action button. As you can see, As expected, the parent component re-renders, then the image, as well as the text component, which doesn't require this information, right? So let's fix it, making sure that changing of fit property should only affect the image component and not the text component. We will take help of React.memo, which is the React higher order component. Memo allows you to wrap a component and it will only re-render it when its prop has changed. Usually when parent component is re-rendered, right, the child components are also forced to re-render. But Memo allows you to avoid that re-render, and only if the child component's prop have changed, then only it will re-render the child component. So let us switch back to VS Code. Okay. Now we'll wrap this text component inside React.memo. Now ideally you can go ahead and directly wrap it, but for easier understanding, I'll just create a new variable and wrap it. So let me rename it as text component. I'll create a new variable called as text and we'll call react.memo and we'll wrap text component. So then I'll just update. Okay, we have imported memo from React module, and then we have just wrapped the text component inside memo. Now we'll just save this file and let's head back to the browser. I'll do a refresh again. As expected, the parent component renders followed by image and text. Let us clear it. Now we'll click on change image render style. Awesome, it worked, right? What Memo did was it compared the previous props to the new ones. And if the values are different, then only it will re-render, else not. When we clicked on change image render style, only the image fit property changed, right? The title and quote, those props that we passed to the text component, remains the same. Since they are the same, the text component will not re-render. That's what React Memo helps us out with. That's the reason we are only seeing the parent component re-render followed by the image. If I change again parent followed by image. Let me clear it. Now if I click on change code, we will see the parent as well as the text component. For now, just ignore the image component, right? Focus on the text component. So clicking on change image render style only renders the required component, that is the image one, because we have wrapped text component inside react.memo. And change code will re-render the text component because the props differ. Because when you click on change code, it will go ahead and change the code, which is a prop for the text component, and thus it re-renders. React.memo, apart from accepting the component to wrap or memorize, it also accepts a second optional argument, which is of type function. So let's look at it. We'll head back to VS Code editor. Okay, we'll name this function as arePropsEqual. Okay, now this is passed as the second argument to memo. Now what's the uses of it? Okay, arePropsEqual is expected to return a boolean value stating if the props are equal or not. So this function accepts two arguments, previous props and new props. So if previous props and new props both are equal, then we'll say that do not re-render the component. Okay, and if they differ, then we say that please re-render the component. So boolean true inside this function, returning a boolean true, will indicate that props are equal, so no re-render. And a boolean false will indicate the props differ, so please re-render the component. Okay, so just add type to this. I've already defined the interface, just making use of it here. Okay, and for our experiment purpose, I'll just return true. Okay, let us also log these two values. So we'll log the previous props as well as the new props. Okay, let's just do a save and head back to the browser. I'll do a refresh of this window. Okay, clear it out. Now we'll click on change image render style. As you see, the parent component is rendered, then the image component. We also get the log statement from the arePropsEqual method. You can see here. The previous props includes a quote and the title. The new props also include the same quote and the title. Let's clear it out. Now we'll click on change quote. As you see, there is no change in this information. It remains the same. But that is expected, isn't it? We sent, if I head back to VS Code, we are sending true here always. No matter what the value is inside the previous prop or the new prop, we're always sending true. Which means that even if they both differ or same, that doesn't matter here. We'll always say that props are equal, so no re-render. Heading back to browser, here you can see the title is same, but the code differs. As you can see, it's starting from growth, and here you can see the previous props at hard work. But since we are sending true from our side, hard coding it it will never re-render, right? What we will do is, heading back to Visual Studio, we'll return false. So what false will say is, the props differ, props are not equal, so re-render it. Now save it, head back to browser, do a refresh. Now if I click on change code, it will re-render, right? Which is expected because we are saying false here. Clear it again. Now if I click on change image render style, it will still re-render because you are sending false directly, saying that the props are not equal. I hope you got the idea. Okay. Now this method, our props are equal, was just for understanding purpose. Okay, I just wanted to let you know that this option is available so that you can have your own customized comparison of the props. But for now, we do not require it, so I'll just remove it. It was just to let you know that this option is available for you to use. I'll just clear it out, do a save of the file, head back to browser, do a refresh. Now if I click on this, only the image renders. If I click on quote, both the image and text component renders. But now as we see, clicking on change quote is ideally only useful to the text component and has nothing to do with the image component, but it is still being re-rendered. Now let us wrap image component with React.memo, the same thing that we did for text component, and see if that works. Back to VS Code, okay, and we'll go to the image component. So with our new learn info, we'll wrap image component with React.memo. So ideally you can do the wrapping directly, but I'll just create a new variable for easier understanding. Install memo and image component. That's all. We'll click on save and let's head back to the browser. Okay, refresh the window and I'll clear the logs here. Now let's tap on change code. Okay, strange. Even though we wrap image component using React.memo, it is still being re-rendered, right? And why would that be? To understand the why behind this behavior, we first need to understand how React.memo does the comparison of the props. Okay, React.memo uses Object.is to compare the props. Now, how Object.is works is, if the two values are same, that means that contain the same value, it will return true, otherwise it will return false. It is similar to the strict equality operator except for NaN and sign zeros. We can ignore it for now. Okay, but React.memo uses Object.is to compare the previous and the newly received props. Okay, to understand it better, let's head back to the VS Code editor and we'll bring back the method arePropsEqual. Okay, let me rewrite it. We have the previous props, which is of type text props, and the new props. and add it as a second argument to the memo here. Earlier we just written directly true or false, right? But this time we'll do a comparison of the props, just how React.memo does it using Object.is. So for the text props here, what are the two props? We have title and quote. So we'll compare each of these individual props using Object.is. Okay, and when both the values title and quote in previous and new props are same, then only we'll say that the text component should not re-render. If one of them has been modified, then we say that component should re-render. So let us define a variable called as isEqual, and we'll use object.is, pass it on previous props.title and new props.title. We want this to be true, for the comparison, as well as we'll also add previous props.quote. We also want this comparison to be made, and new props.quote. Let us log it. And we'll return this value. Save it out. So what we have done is we have brought back our props.equal method. Okay, we have done the comparison of the individual props that is received by the test component, which is the title and quote. We have used object.is, which is internally used by React.memo for comparing the props, and we have used for title whether previous props title received in previous prop equals to the new props or not. Similarly, we have done the comparison for quote in previous and new props. So we have already saved this file. Let's head back to browser. I'll do a refresh of the app. Okay, clear it out. Now we'll click on change image render style. So if we can see, it's logging out true. This is just how object.is work, right? If I can write it out here, object.is, it says here Naruto. I will compare it with Naruto. This is just how the title was compared, right? If I change it, then it will return false. But in our case, when we clicked on change image render style, the title or the code, neither of them were changed. So it returned true to us. We'll clear it out. Now I'll click on change code. Now it's saying us the props are not equal, returning false. Thus the text component was re-rendered. Now we'll do exactly the same for image component. Okay, so I'll remove it from here and let me move it up in here. Okay, I'll pass it as the second argument to the memo here, and here it will be image props. We'll bring back image props here. Okay, what value does the props has is the info. So, and it only accepts one props, right? That's the info one. So if not clear, I can just head back to the parent component, and here you see to the image component we are just passing one prop, that is the info, which is object and contains two keys. Let us head back. Okay, it accepts info, that's the only one, and we'll compare info here with the new one, and we'll say are image props equal or not. Let's hit save. Hope you understood what we did here. We are just comparing info received in previous props and the new props, and we are using object.is. Okay, we'll log it out and return. Head back to browser. Let us do a refresh, clear it out, and click on change image render style. When we click on it, as expected, we are getting false here, right? Because the fit property has changed. Let me clear it out. Now we'll click on change code. Now if you see here, clicking on change code has nothing to do with the image component, right? Whatever the props it received, that was the object having URL and the fit property. Though they remain exactly the same, but we still receive false here. Now, if you want, we can also log out the previous and the new props. So let us log it out, previous props and the newly received one, just to confirm that the values are same. Hit save, head back to browser, do a refresh, and let's click on change code. If you see here, the info, the URL, and the fit property comparing with the new props, it's exactly the same object contain and the URL. But it still says us the object.is when we do the comparison that the props are not equal, that the info object is not equal. Why that would be is just because how JavaScript stores the object inside the memory. Let's try to understand that. Understanding primitive data type and how they are compared. Let me head to a flowchart kind that I created. So primitive data types such as string, numbers, boolean, or so on are compared by values. So when you use object.is, they are being compared by their values directly. Let's say you have a variable called as name1 and you assign this value to it. Similarly, you have another variable called as name2 with the same value. Now, inside JavaScript, this is how they are being stored. The value is stored directly, assigning the variable. The same thing is being done for name2. Now, when you use object.is to compare whether name1 equals name2 or not, these values are directly compared. As you can see here, the values are exactly the same, consisting of the value John Doe, and it will return true to you. So primitive data types are compared by values. Okay. For the text component, we have two primitive data types, right? Quote and title, both were of type string. I've considered here just the quote. Okay. The previous props, let's say you clicked on change image render style. All right. So the previous prop will have quote, which will consist of these value. And in the JavaScript memory, this is how it will be stored. The new prop, when you click on change image render style and arePropsEqual method is invoked, it will have the quote, which is of string type, and the value. This is how it will be stored. When you use object.is to compare previous props.quote whether it equals to the new props.quote or not, these values are exactly the same. So it will return true to you. Same comparison is being done with title because it's also of the primitive data type, which is string. Things differ when it comes to the reference data type. Okay, the reference data type are not compared by their values directly, but by their memory address. Consider the image component, right? It accepts this object called as info, having two keys, URL and the fit property. Inside the JavaScript memory, we have the variable name as info, but the value is not this value directly, but rather it has the kind of a pointer to where the actual value exists. So it has a memory address stating where the value is and not the actual value. That's the thing to understand. Okay. Now, let me just switch to it. Okay. Now, when you click on change code, right, consider that this is the previous prop and this is the new props. You can see the URL, the fit, and the URL and fit both the in previous and new are exactly the same. But you have to look at how they are saved inside the JavaScript memory. Here you can see it's not the value directly, but rather a memory address, which will point to the actual value. And when the parent re-renders, because of a change in a state information that was code, it will create a brand new object of info and give it a new memory address. Okay. This new memory address will consist of the value now. And when you use object.is to compare previous prop.info, whether it equals to the new prop.info, it will compare these memory addresses. And that's the reason it will return false to you, because it is not comparing by the value, which is done in case of primitive type, but rather in case of memory address. And that's why even though you click on change code, which changes a property of text component, I mean a prop of text component, and has nothing to do with the image component, it will still re-render because of the reference data type that is being passed as a prop to the image component, and reference data type are compared by memory address. And to save us from this reference equality, we'll use the React hook called as useMemo. useMemo allows us to cache the result of a calculation between re-renders. The uses of it will actually help you to understand this statement. Let's head to VS Code editor. Okay, we'll head to the parent component. Now, to this image component, we are passing this image info object, right? So instead of directly passing it, we'll wrap it using useMemo. So let's comment it out. We'll declare the same variable name, image info, but this time we'll use useMemo. useMemo accepts two parameters. One is a function whose return value you want to cache. Now this value can be of any data type. And the second parameter is a dependency array. We'll come to it in a minute. Now, inside this function, what is the value that we want to return? Is this one. So we'll write return, then the object. Dependency array string says that at what point should I send you the updated one? Now send me an updated object whenever there is a change in anime image, or if there is a change in image render style, right? Only at these 2 points do send me an updated one. As always, send me the cast result. That's how it works. Alright, let's head and just to show you, useMemo is imported from the React module. Okay, so whenever there is a change in these two values, useMemo will send you an updated value. Else it will always send you the same value that it said in the previous render. So let's head to the browser. We'll do a refresh of the app. Clear it out. Let's click on change image render style. So here our image props equal, it says false. So image component re-renders. And that's obvious because there is a change in fit property. In previous prop we have fit as object contain. Next we have object hyphen cover. So there was a re-render of the image component. Now we'll click on change code. Okay. This time it will say our image props equal true. If you compare the values, it's also the same. The reason is because we are using useMemo. And since there was no change in the two values that we added in the dependency, the image URL or the image render style, useMemo send you the same value that it sent you in the previous render. I'll show you with a flow chart. This is how it looks like. This is the previous prop, right? You click on change code. The new prop will also point to the same memory address. The previous prop was pointing to this memory address. The new will also point to the same memory address. And when you will use Object.is, both this will be equal. Compared when we are not using useMemo, it was creating a brand new object. So the memory address were different. Thus the comparison was returning false to you. But here, there is no recreation of a brand new object for info object. It's the same one because of which we are using useMemo. Okay, now let me just remove that arePropsEqual method. So it will work without that. Here, do a refresh. If I click on change code, only the text component will re-render. To show you how the dependency array works, what we can do is just remove everything. When you keep it as empty array, it means that there is no value that is affecting the value that is being returned from this function. So no matter what happens, I'll always send you the same object. If I go back here, Clear it out. If you click on change image render style, what do you expect to happen? There should be no change in how it fits inside this container, as you can see, because you are saying that here there's no dependency, right? So it will always send you the same memory address. Previous and the new props will always have the same memory address. So object.is will always return true, and thus there will be no re-render of the image component. So make sure you add the right dependency here. If accidentally you add, let's say, quote, right? Changing of quote will re-render the image component. Okay, so make sure that the values that you add inside the dependency array are the right ones. So we have understood about useMemo and memo. Next, let's try to understand about useCallback. And useCallback, let's add a functionality to the image component wherein when you click on this image, right, it will change how it fits inside the container. So up until now, when we are clicking on change image render style, it was changing the fit property. But we'll add a new functionality to the image component wherein when you click on the image, it should change the fit property. So let's head back to VS Code. Okay. So what is the method that we called on toggle render side? This is the method. We'll pass it here as a prop to the image component. Okay. Let me head to the interface for image props. Just add it accepts another prop which is of type function. Okay, and in here we'll accept that prop. Okay, now to the image element we'll add the on click method. On click of it, please call the toggle render style. So let us reiterate. What we did was, earlier we had this functionality. When you click on change image render style, it was making a call to toggle render style method, which was changing how the image fit inside the container. As per the new functionality, when you click on the image that is presented here, the object fit property should change. For that, what we did, we are passing a new prop to the image component called as toggle render style, and we are passing the method that it should invoke, right? And when we head to the image component, minimize it. Here it is. We are now accepting this new prop, and on click of the image, we are just invoking whatever is the passed method to it. If I head back to browser, let us do a refresh. If I click on it, awesome, it's working as expected. Now, there's one thing that's being broken here. If we now click on change code, what do you think will happen? Let us see. If I click on change code, you can see the image component is still re-rendering. Why would that be? The reason is that we are now passing a new prop to the image component, which is the function. And functions are first class object. So they are treated just like the object, and comparison is through reference type, right? So whenever the parent component changes, so when you click on change code, the parent component re-rendered, this particular method which is passed down as a prop to this component will also be recreated. So a brand new function will be created. And when you will use Object.is to compare toggle render style between renders, previous prop and new prop, it will return false. Because every time the parent component re-renders, it will be recreated. And since it is of reference data type, they are compared using the memory address. And re-render and will trigger a new memory address. And when you compare it using Object.is, it will return you false. That's the reason here, when you click on change code, the image component is re-rendering. How to fix that? We'll fix that using useCallback. So what we'll do is toggle render style function using useCallback. useCallback helps you to cache a function between re-renders. Okay, so what we'll do is we can directly wrap toggle render style here, but for easier understanding, let's renaming it. I'll create the same variable. Okay, and this time we will use useCallback. Similar to useMemo, useCallback also accepts two parameters. One is the function that you want to return, and the next parameter is the dependency array. So what is the function we want to cache? Is the toggle render style fn. So just remove this and pass this function. And are there any values which toggle render style fn is using inside its definition? Right now we do not have. Consider for some reason or somehow you were using the quote variable, right? Let's say something like this, right? Then you would have passed this quote variable as the value inside the dependency array. So whenever there would be a change in the quote value, useCallback will return you that function for that particular render. Else, if there is no change in the dependency array, it will return you the function that it sent you in the last render. Right now, we do not have any such value that this function is using inside its definition. So we'll have an empty array, right? Which means that anytime the parent component re-renders, useCallback will always send the same function that it sent in the last render because it's not dependent on any value here. We have kept it as an empty array. So let's head to our browser. We'll do a refresh. Okay, clear it out. Now when we click on change code, we can see only the text component will re-render and not the image component. This is because we have now used useCallback and it is sending the same function referencing to the same memory address between previous and the new props. Until now, whatever we have learned about these React hooks is how to use them. And when you do use them, what difference do they make to the React's render logic? Ideally, till now, whatever scenarios you have used these hooks are not the ideal scenarios. Honestly, you should not be bothered by these unnecessary renders unless they cause a performance issue. Only when you see a performance issue, you should try to see if useMemo or useCallback can help you out. Else, it's not required. Let me demonstrate this with an example. We'll head back to the VS Code editor. Okay. What I've done is I've updated the code to introduce a new component called as ratings. It accepts two props, ratings and left. Left is used for styling and ratings is used to display the rating for the selected anime. We also have a logic to get the ratings. Okay, we'll come back to it in a minute. Now to this parent component anime, we have added the ratings component here, passing those two props. Okay, the left prop is calculated from the use state, initializing it to 0. Then using a use effect, we are updating the left property so that it animates. We are not going into the details about how the animation works here, but just understand the left property is updated for that particular div. Okay, and the ratings as of now is considered as a constant. Right now, we'll just save it. And I've also commented out this console log so that you do not get disturbed by the number of log statement you see. We have saved it. Let's head back to the browser and we'll do a refresh. So this is how the animation looks like. Okay, even if you change the anime, it won't bother because we have kept it as constant. Now let's head back to VS Code. So instead of having it as a constant value, what we'll do is we'll call this getRatings function. This getRatings function accepts the anime title. So we'll pass the title of that selected anime. We're not going into the details about how the getRatings is calculating, right, the anime's rating, but just understand that it's performing some kind of heavy mathematical operation to get the ratings. Okay, we'll hit, before we hit save, let me just go back to the browser again so that you can see the animation, right, and the difference once we save it. Head back to VS Code editor. Click on save under the web app. I hope you can see the difference now, right? The animation is not smooth at all. Since we observed a UI sluggishness, let's see if use of useMemo or useCallback can help us out here. Let's head to VS Code Editor. So instead of calling this value directly, we'll use useMemo. And in the first function, we'll return the value. And inside the dependency array, we'll add animate.title because it uses that value to calculate the ratings. Save it, head back to your web app. Now you can see the performance issue no longer exists and the animation is smooth. If I change the anime, it kind of holds for a microseconds or so, and then the animation works as expected, right? So you have to determine it by yourself if there's a performance issue, and if there is, whether use of useMemo or useCallback can help you fix it. Just apply the principle. If ain't broke, don't fix it. Well, thank you everyone for watching this video. I hope you get away with something to explore from it. Keep learning and happy coding.